Hello, I am Kevin Cabrera, Library Clerk at the Santa Ana Public Library. Today we are in the History Room conducting an oral history for the Santa Ana Community Oral History Program. Today is Thursday, January 10th, 2013. It is 2:20 p.m. Can you please state your full name?
My name is Carole Griffith Van Houten.
Carole Griffith Van Houten. And can you please give me your date and place of birth, Carole?
I was born in Los Angeles, California, October 12, 1934.
And Carole, you're here today representing an organization. Which organization are you representing?
I represent the Docent Guild and the Bowers Museum. I've been a docent at the museum for 28 years, and I've been on the Board of Governors for approximately 7 years.
And Carole, as a docent and being in the Docent Guild, what are your duties?
Well, the Docent Guild was developed in 1973 by a woman named Ann Spencer. And they set up most of the rules, regulations, and details. A docent usually tours twice a month, and it used to be up until Dr. Keller came in 91 or 92, it was really geared for children. The building itself was built in 1936, and it was the Mr. and Mrs. Bowers, Charles Bowers. They had no children, and the building was a beautiful East Lake Victorian, and on the corner there, it was exquisite. And they wanted to either, when they passed on, they wanted to either turn it into a school or a library for children, something for children in the community. And so after they passed on, the city took it over, which the city still owns the building itself, and they turned it into a museum for children, a museum of California and Orange County. And I first went to the Bowers when I was a Girl Scout leader, and my daughter was in the Girl Scouts. And a lot of Girl Scout leaders remember it when we went there, because they had the wonderful Indian exhibit and Christopher Columbus and Wells Fargo.
Now you said, how long have you been with the Bowers for?
I've been with the Bowers for 28 years, going on 29.
28 years, going on 29. And how did you become involved with the Bowers Museum?
Well, my children got through school and college, and I had been teaching in Garden Grove School District and high school and community outreach programs, adult education. And so I read a little article in the paper that said that they needed some docents at the Bowers Museum. And since I've always wanted to be in a museum, and LA was just getting too hard to get to with the traffic, so I went down and I was interviewed. They used to interview you first to see and everything. And so I signed up, and I found it to be one of the most wonderful things to volunteer there, because you had history, you constantly had to learn new exhibits, you constantly had to know what was going on in the museum, and touring people was just wonderful, children and adults.
So as a docent, is it a volunteer position or is it a paid position?
No, it's totally volunteer.
Totally volunteer.
Yes.
And how many times are you usually there a week or a month?
Well, because I have been there so long, after 10 years you can go on a program of, it's called the 10-10. You just tour for 10 months, one time a month.
Okay.
But I go to all the docent trainings and all the docent meetings and all the events that they have.
Now, going on 29 years being at the Bowers, that's a very long time. What has kept you there all these years?
It keeps your brain stimulated. You're constantly learning things about the headhunters of New Guinea, of Chinese art from the very beginning. Right now we have a wonderful display of costumes from movies. We just closed down our Fabergé exhibits. We learned all about the Russians and the Revolution and Fabergé and his wonderful jewels. And it goes on and on and on. And there are listings of all the programs and exhibits that we've had. I can't remember all of them, but multitudes, and you have to study and be able to give this. I only tour adults now. I do afternoon touring. And I find adults stimulating because sometimes they know more than I do.
Now that hasn't always been the case, right? You've always have been a docent for children's as well?
Yes, I did docenting for children. We didn't have an adult program for many years. And then the children, and I used to do the outreach also on top of my in-house. I would go out to schools and we would have kits that we would take out, and I did early California Indians. And it's wonderful for the teachers because now we have about 7 or 8 different programs that we take into the curriculum that's based on school curriculum, and we take out to the children.
And being that your background was in teaching, that fits very well with you, right? Now you said that for a long time there wasn't any adult programming at the Bowers. What changed, and how did adult programming come to fruition?
We had one docent that was very involved in it, but it never got through. And then when Dr. Peter Keller, came in '92, he had incredible vision and incredible ideas. And at that time, I was chairman of the Docent Guild, and we hit it off beautifully. And we were able to do many, many things, like get the afternoon program in. And 2 years later, we opened up the Kidseum, which used to be a bank on the corner of 19th and Main. And the city owns that, I believe. I don't know if you should put that down, whether they still own that piece of property or not. I'm just not positive. But we turned that bank into a wonderful Kidseum, which is wonderful, and they have summer camps and programs there. And we have many grants that come to the Kidseum, just automatically people do, for children to come in free. And we have afternoon programs where they can come in and do their homework, and for the neighborhood children. And that is a wonderful thing that we have. That's one of my very favorite.
I see.
Because we're doing something for the community. We have a lot of school children. Their schools can't afford buses to bring them in for exhibits, but many of the schools in Anaheim, Garden Grove, and Santa Ana cannot afford buses. So we have many grants and monies that have gone in to help to bring in pay for the buses, which are a fortune. And it used to be free to all children and all people, the museum. But you can't do that anymore, and it's a shame.
Now I'm going to kind of regress a little bit. I know you spoke about this a little bit, but I would like, can you speak about a little bit of the history of the museum?
Yes. As I said before, the Ada and Charles Bowers lived there. After they died, the city took over the property. They decided on a museum, and they tore down the home, and they built this beautiful building, the original building. In 1936 it was finished. So we had that being done during the Depression, and we had the artisans under the federal programs that Roosevelt put in do a lot of the paintings in there and designs. And if you have never been in the original building, you have lost a lot, because it's the most beautiful part of the whole museum. And it holds our original exhibits, the early California Indians, Mesoamericans, in that end of the museum. And the rest of the museum has been, we had one great big expansion, and then we finally finished a few years ago with our last big expansion. And now we have 2 parking lots that we have purchased. And so we've done very well since Dr. Keller's come in. And he's been constant with us. And I think he'll be there maybe 4 or 5 more years.
Okay. Now, what did Charles and Ada Bowers do for a living? Do you know? But you know that they wanted to leave the home for the family or for the city. Okay.
And for children.
And for children.
Specifically.
And why do you think that was important to the city of Santa Ana?
Because Santa Ana at that time didn't have much in the cultural area. It was still, it was not what you call a real young city, but it wasn't a real progressive city at that time. And so this was a wonderful, and it was free for so many years, really up until the, I'd say up until the early 90s. Easy.
Now, can you speak about what Bowers' mission is?
The mission was originally a cultural museum of art, and it really isn't under that title anymore. It's more of a historical museum, and we have traveling exhibits now that are quite good. We have interaction with the British Museum of Art, in which we have sent some of our exhibits to England, and they sent us a wonderful Egyptian exhibit. We have incredible Chinese exhibits due to Mrs. Anne Shi, A-N-N-E-S-H-I-H, who is a volunteer at our museum. She's now the chairman of the board. She is Chinese. She is very well placed in China, their government, and in the United States. And her Chinese exhibits, terracotta warriors, the one with the emperor, the little boy who was the emperor of China, and they have just been incredible. We have many people. Dr. Fink has just given us his collection of scrimshaw. It now belongs to the museum, and so we have that exhibit up, which is very popular. So we have a multitude of different types of exhibits now. And the Houston Museum of Art and Bowers work together. And when they get a very good one, it comes to Bowers and vice versa. So we have, the development and the workings of a museum is fascinating. It's non-profit, and which is in itself anymore a difficult position to be in, but we have been doing quite well.
That's good. So you're saying that originally the mission was for cultural art, but has recently has kind of turned into also dealing with history and having historic exhibits. And
like Fabergé. And like we have Madeleine Albright's pins. This has brought in an incredible amount of people. We have been packed between Fabergé, that, and the movie costumes. And so these are all staying a shorter time, but they're bringing in an incredible amount of people. Now, the children normally don't go into those museums. Usually we get high percentages of the children with like the Chinese exhibits, like terracotta warriors, and things like that. Oh, we have the headhunters, which they adore. It's New Guinea. And it's a collection of the museum, and it will go out on tour eventually to other museums.
Now, I understand that the Bowers actually closed down for a period of time.
Yes.
Can you speak about when that occurred?
Yes.
And what was the purpose of
the
that?
The Bowers closed down to put the first expansion in. I believe that was approximately 2 years, maybe 2.5. And at that time, we were down to like 20 docents, and those were doing outreach programs because there was no touring inside the museum. And then as soon as the museum reopened again and Dr. Keller came in, we brought our membership back up to about 140 docents, and it's stayed that way pretty closely. And most of our docents stay. It's amazing. We have a lot in the high 30 years.
Oh. And do you remember what time period or when it closed down, what years, the frame?
Just a second. Can they cut this for a second, really think? It reopened in 19... I haven't got those dates in my head. I can give them to you afterwards, but I haven't got them. It closed down. It reopened in 1992.
1992.
So it closed down in around 1989.
1989.
And through there, yeah.
And that was due specifically for expansion.
For the expansion, yes. And they kept the original part of the museum, and then they just added on to it, make it larger, and they put in a restaurant and a gift shop.
Okay. Now you spoke about some of the exhibits that the Bowers puts on. Do the Bowers have any sort of special exhibits or any special programs that they put on as well?
They put on, we have a public program that are done in the auditorium. We were very fortunate with our second expansion. Norma Kershaw, she is on the Board of Governors, and she's a philanthropic person, and she opened up and built the most magnificent auditorium. It can hold 350 people in upholstered seats. It has a screen that is as large as any professional movie house screen. It has a green room. And so we have wonderful speakers. Like today I went and heard about this man, I couldn't believe it, climbing Mount Everest in his 70s. And we have had a series of this gentleman that collects all old movie clips and things of the stars, and he puts on, like Bob Hope. There were 3 different days of Bob Hope. From the time he was young, his career and everything. And Bing Crosby, dancing, Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers. That type of thing pulls a lot of people. We have a wonderful program going in a connection with Hogue in Newport Beach Hospital. They on Alzheimer's and the creativity side of the brain, and we have classes for people, and they come and they have a lecture by the doctors, and then they actually do crafts and art, and they find that this opens up quite a bit for a lot of the older people that have this problem. Many younger people have it too. It's not just the elderly, but it's usually from, I think, from about 60 on. And so that's a wonderful public program that we have, and that's run by Nancy Worzer Brady. She's a vice president of education. And it's also funded by the James Irvine Grant.
James Irvine Grant. Now you've been, like you mentioned, you've been with the museum for 29 years. Has there been one specific exhibition or that has made a large impact on you personally? Or what has been your favorite exhibition that you've seen all the years?
I have to admit, Weird and Wonderful, I just fell in love with. Weird and Wonderful was a couple of years ago, and it was, we have our person that deals with our exhibits, our artifacts, and we have a lot that have been just given over the years from 1936 on, and they really don't have much to do with the museum, but I found them fascinating. The original cash register from the original drugstore in Long Beach, I mean in Santa Ana. We have wonderful rugs from the Indians that lived here. We have relics from the Chinatown that was here, and it was all burned down at one time by people that didn't like the Chinese.
Mm-hmm.
And we have a lot of the Spanish artifacts,
Mm-hmm.
the helmets that they wore when they came in, their swords and guns.
Oh, wow.
And we have it was just a pottery that you just cannot believe. And we just had a board retreat. I wasn't able to go to Bogota because we sent to them for a specific time our collection of Mayan and South American artifacts, and that were absolutely fantastic. We've never had them in our museum for show. Now the whole board wants to have an exhibit of them. They're so beautiful. And so the museum is a very interesting place. It used to have things like baby buggies that were donated and little things like that, which have been distributed. They have contacted the people because we really don't use that type of thing.
Yeah.
But we have the finest collection of dolls. And it was all started by a lady that gave the first doll, which was a Bailo doll. It's a China head doll.
Mm-hmm.
And it started the collection, and every year at Christmas time they used to put up, this was before the 90s,
Mm-hmm.
They used to put up a Christmas tree in the foyer, and then they had all these wonderful dolls in the little antique high chairs and little antique buggies. And people would bring their grandchildren and their children to see them. But we don't display them anymore.
So you would say World's Weird and Wonderful has
Yes.
been your favorite exhibition?
Those were, yeah, as far as I'm concerned,
Mhm.
I just love things like that. I like very eclectic collections. And we have lots of field trips the docents do.
Mm-hmm.
And then they have another layer called the Fellows. And that Fellows, you pay X amount per year.
Mm-hmm.
And we have where we go into people's homes that have these wonderful collections that they share and show. And we had one that was fascinating. It was at a home up in the Hollywood Hills. And this man was from D.C., and he was a forensic anthropologist. And he went over, and during the Sarajevo problems,
Mm-hmm.
he was able to go in, and with the bones and all, because they didn't know whose body was what, he was able to connect most of those.
Wow.
Then he showed us skulls from the Indian period here, where the arrows went through. I mean, it was just fantastically interesting.
Oh, wow.
So we really get to do a lot of very interesting things.
Mm-hmm.
And then the board has wonderful events too.
Can you speak of some of the events that the board has?
The board always has a wonderful Christmas party. We always have our meetings the third Tuesday of the month, every other month.
Mm-hmm.
And we have field trips. They have wonderful retreats where they go every 5 years to discuss what we need to do for the next 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
And we've come out on top of most of the things that we've come up with.
Mm-hmm.
It is a very sophisticated museum now,
Mm-hmm.
extremely sophisticated. And we have registrars that know what they're doing, and they have everything on the computer now.
Mm-hmm.
And Julie has just been an incredible person. When she came in, she has just taken over wonderfully.
Mm-hmm.
And since the computer came in, everything's changed.
That actually brings me to my next question,
Mm-hmm.
which was, you've been there so many years, how has Bowers changed? How can you speak about the changes, and how has it been good? Has it been bad?
Good. It's been good. We now have, when we have large groups of people coming in, the docents now have these where they talk into something they have here, and they can hear it.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't have to talk real loud to that many people.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a good thing. And we have, I think the training of the docents is very good. I think they've done a very good job in how to give the tours and how to keep people interested.
Mm-hmm.
We have a gift shop that's fantastic, and they have good sales. And It's just we have the wonderful pictures that float through on these big screens, all in Technicolor, that show the exhibits that we have and the dates, and it, it runs across. That's all new. These are all new things that we've never had before.
Are there any changes, have there been any changes to the museum that, in your opinion, maybe have had a negative impact in the community?
No. My only problem myself, and this is personally my opinion, is we're not doing enough outreach to bring in the community. I would like to see some very, very good Mexican art brought in. Contemporary and ancient. I think that by doing so, we should be able to get some grants so that these children and adults can come in and see what they have done for this Southern California. And in our courtyard, we have the wonderful metates and all that, and we have the wonderful cactus that the ranchers would go out and take during the Santa Ana winds, and the animals were starving. They were so thirsty, like in the Yorba Ranch, and they would take these little fire things and burn off all the thorns so that the animals could get the water out of these big cactuses. We have one of those in our courtyard. But I think we used to have one room that was devoted to the Modjeska. That was another famous person. We don't have that anymore. But that would be what I would like to see, is more outreach. But you see, that is not, unless we can get a grant, the people can't afford to come in. And so you have to get the grant to support it.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you spoke about these very high class, high profile exhibits coming in from around the world. Are there any plans or anything to bring any exhibits that are really kind of, besides the permanent exhibits that you have, that are just dealing with Southern California or Santa Ana history or anything like that?
Not at this time.
Not at this time.
No, there's going to be one, I believe, that's going to be coming in from Italy. Those are very expensive. I have always wondered, which I guess is a good thing you brought that up, because I've always thought to ask Peter about, why can't we do something with the Long Beach, I think it's called the Long Beach Mexican American Art.
Yes.
And why can't we do more? They are doing an incredible job with bringing in Mexican art, contemporary art and old art. I would like to see that done more, because I don't think that we're totally, most of our people are coming from outside Santa Ana.
Why do you think that is?
They can afford it.
They can afford it.
I'm not saying all Santa Ana cannot afford it. I'm saying where we are located is a problem. And that's why our Kidseum has been so successful, because we have these programs that the children can come in. But at a certain age, you see, they're too big for those programs.
Yes. Can you speak a little bit more about the Kidseum and how you've seen the impact that it has in the children in the community?
The Kidseum, in my opinion, have you ever seen it?
Yes.
I think have you seen it recently?
Not recently.
All right, Genevieve Southgate. Do you know her?
I know of her. I've never met her personally. I would love to meet her.
To meet her is, she's incredible. She would be very good too on this. Genevieve Southgate is Mexican, and she gets along with everybody like I've never seen in my life. And she has really done the running of it ever since it opened. And she has a great affinity with these children. She, every year, gets donations from people and takes about 10 back to Washington, D.C., just for a week to see everything in Washington, D.C. I mean, she does these wonderful things for these children to open up their vistas. She also has, it's instilled in the after-school program for kids to do homework. She gets along with a lot of the gang members and has tried to bring them in to see a different sort of thing rather than just hang out. And I think that she, in my estimation, is one of the finest people I've ever met. And she also has a Christmas party every year with the finest Mexican food you've ever tasted at her home.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the Kidseum, it started out very sparse, and we really didn't know what we were doing.
Mm-hmm.
We got committees from the city and from the docents and from the museum where we were trying to figure out how other ones are so successful, like La Habra is very successful, and why we couldn't get the success. Well, we never really had good marketing. Now we have incredible marketing.
Mm-hmm.
That time we didn't have really good marketing. And so it has evolved, and her son has done all the murals. Genevieve's son is an incredible artist. He has done all the murals in that Kidseum. And you must go down and see that. It's a real experience. She'd love to meet you.
Mm-hmm.
And so she's kept it kind of a family thing, and the teachers there are beyond anything.
Mm-hmm.
They just know how to work with children. They have professional storytellers. They have professional musicians that come in, teach the children about music, and it's wonderful. And then they have summer camps. Now there, again, they're very expensive, you know, so unless you can get the underwriting.
So it seems like the Kidseum has had a very good impact within the community of Santa Ana,
so.
whereas opposed to the Bowers is many of the folks coming in are outside of Santa Ana.
Yeah, like the last couple weeks before the New Year, it was just packed on the Fabergé. It was just packed. And that isn't really an interest, probably, that a lot of people around the museum would be their first, or Madeleine Albright's pins, you know. But I'm hoping that when we get that exhibit of ours back from Bogota, Colombia, that we will put up that exhibit, because it's dynamite.
Now, I know that I just lost my train of thought. What was I going to say? I blanked. I know that you also mentioned that you're part of the Board of Governors.
Yes.
So, as being part of the Board of Governors, what are your duties, or what do you do for them?
I have been on the Education Committee, and in that we are trying to come up. We're having a problem with our historical part of the museum, which is the original. Teachers are not booking that, and the reason they're not booking that is it has no pizzazz. It has no. Nowadays things are different. You have to have some pizzazz, and the teachers aren't booking it, and so it's getting kind of. There's some people that want to do away with all of the historical end of it, but that's not what we want. And so we have been doing. We just started it, going to the. I don't remember her name, but she's with the county educational board, and she's also a teacher. And we brought in a group of students and had them go through the whole museum and tell us what they liked and what they didn't and what they thought could be done. Of course, now this was from a really nice, high-end Yorba Linda school, but still, these kids were pretty sharp. And so we're going to try to instill some of the ideas that these kids are coming up with. And you need more interaction. Children nowadays, because of computers and all these things, technical things that they have, they get information immediately, and they visualize and see things immediately.
Yes.
And so what you've got to do with children now is you've got to engage them that way. So this is our newest thing that we're going to try to do, because I think we have the artifacts, we have the things to put in, but to make it exciting and to make it fun. When you think about the Indians, California Indians, and you think of how they lived and how they survived without TVs and without refrigerators, and it's fascinating. It's just fascinating. And then when the Spanish conquerors came in, and then the Father Sarah came in with all the mission. I mean, it's a fascinating state.
It is.
That's why I was so sad to hear about the Hauser.
I know.
But that's what we've got to do for the kids, I mean for the historical, because the architecture in there is exquisite.
It is.
Upstairs we have what I call the Bowers Sistine Chapel. The whole ceiling is hand painted with the history of California, the grizzly bears, the gold rush, up to Disneyland.
Wow.
I mean, it's just incredible. And it's never seen because we have our California paintings up there, and there's very hard to get people to go in the historical when they all are going into the new exhibits. As a docent, I usually make it my point to take them upstairs. And they're amazed. They're just amazed at that beautiful room up there. You wouldn't want to close this off.
Yeah.
You wouldn't want it. It's too beautiful.
So even though Bowers is today and continues to be successful, there are some areas that need to be
Of course.
worked on.
I think with any place that you work or any place that you're dealing with the public, there are. And I do put a tremendous amount of wonderful, wonderful accolades to Dr. Peter Keller. He can schmooze. He can talk people into things. He is incredible in getting exhibits and sending all of our exhibits, and he's an incredible man.
Can you talk a little bit about Dr. Keller, when he became involved with Bowers, what his background is, and what he has done?
He's from Pennsylvania, and he's a geologist, PhD in geology. And he, for many years, was in Los Angeles at the Natural History Museum in Los Angeles, in the Coliseum area there. And he was on the board, and he got, and he was very happy there. He liked it very much. But he got a call from somebody, it was a foundation, when we started in the 90s, this change. And he got a call from them to come and see if you'd be interested in taking over the museum. We had, since I've been there, 3 different people. Normally you would remember the names of the directors of the museum. We never saw them, we never heard from them. They were just there, and maybe for 1 year, one was for 3 years, and I think another one was for 2. He's been there since '92. Loved every minute of it. His passion is New Guinea art. Every summer he goes there on his vacation.
So having that, you can see the difference of having a director that's very involved and someone that is really happy.
Say it one more time.
You can. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
You can see the difference of having a director that's very involved and someone who's maybe kind of closed off.
And he is able to also get many, many, many donations. Which is very important.
Can I have your attention, please? Today, please report to speculation.
Dealing with something, entity that is non-profit.
Yes, yes. And the mayor of Santa Ana is wonderful. He comes to a lot of our board meetings, but he has been so wonderful with anything we wanted, anything we needed. He was very instrumental in getting it for us. And of course the budget has been cut way, way, way back. But we've been very fortunate because of Ann Shee was able to bring in these fantastic exhibits that we got so many people that came in for them.
And Ann Shee was the lady that you said.
She's the president of the Board of Governors. She is a volunteer. She has her own office. She takes students every summer to Shanghai or Singapore to see what China's like and to educate them in the Chinese way of life. She has high energy like I've never seen in my entire life, very generous, and very generous financially, extremely so. And she has really, on the money end of it, before this recession thing started, we had really been good. So we're very careful now.
And I believe that that area of the museum that deals with the Chinese exhibits, that there always has to be a Chinese exhibit in that area,
It's a
correct?
permanent exhibit.
It's a permanent exhibit.
Permanent exhibit. Yes, and you can get your name on the wall too, if you have the money. Which is wonderful that people will do this, because seriously, if you don't have these people in the community that will do these things for you.
I think I've asked all my questions that I wanted to ask.
I was sorry on a couple of them. I just couldn't remember.
Oh, no, it's okay. If there's anything that I missed that maybe you wanted to speak about that you would like to say right now, you definitely have the time to.
Well, all I can say is that I think that the Bowers Museum is the jewel of Santa Ana. And we have tried so heavily to get connections with the Anaheim Convention Center and all that. They are not too accepting of that. I think they want to keep all their tourists right there. But I think that we are the jewel. I'm very proud of the museum. I think it brings in more than any of the other museums in Santa Ana or Newport Beach. I think that we are bringing in more people than even the Newport Beach Museum of Art has. And all I can say is it's the jewel.
If there's anyone that wants to become involved with the Bowers, is there any way that they can become involved with the
yes,
Bowers?
we're on at the internet, bowersmuseum.bowers.org. And if they want to be, for instance, in the docent program, you can get all the information that you need and the contacts. And if you want to be involved in being a volunteer, if you just want to know more about the museum, you can get on. The internet has been really wonderful, even though I'm not really good with the internet yet, but from what I've seen and done, it's good. The docents get all their newsletters and everything now through it.
Well, I'm done with my questions. Manny, do you have anything that you wanted to ask?
Okay. So my name is Manuel Escamilla. I'm the archivist over at the Santa Ana History Room. Thank you for participating in this oral history. I just had a follow-up question to maybe just if you could maybe elaborate on the future of what you see for the future of museums and art institutions in Santa Ana, particularly with the in reference to the Discovery Science Center and that formation of a lot of museums kind of in that area of Santa Ana, and how you see that either positively or just somehow affecting the future of the city as a whole.
Well, as far as the Discovery Museum, we have tried, but we don't seem to have enough of a correlation of interests. Do you know what I mean? I know they're very successful and they're doing very, very well. They brought in some wonderful things for kids. I took my grandsons there when they were little, and they loved it. I think that the museum, we have reciprocals with other museums, even the New York Metropolitan Museum of Art, we have reciprocals. But I think that it will get bigger and better if whoever follows our Peter Keller has the same type of foresight and enthusiasm. That's what you need very much. You have to be very enthusiastic, and you have to make people really want to come and see the wonderful things. And I've taken so many of my friends, I drag them to them. No, I don't drag them. They want to go. And it's just, if it can stay the way it is, it will probably be a hold for a long time. But it can still get bigger and better. There's no reason it can't. And a lot has to do with the finances. This is a very difficult time. Bringing in those exhibits like the one from the British Museum of Art, bringing in a lot of those Chinese exhibits, it's a very expensive. And California is the highest of all the museums because of earthquakes. So the insurance is far. We had the Terracotta Warriors, and we had a board meeting upstairs, and an earthquake hit. It was a Tuesday, about 3 years ago. Earthquake hit, and we really felt it. And Peter and Ann Shee went tearing down the stairs to be sure but nothing. None of them. No, they haven't moved. They haven't moved. But no, I don't think it will ever go under. I think it will always stay, and it will be wonderful.
Okay. Well, again, thank you very much, Carole.
Did I answer your question? Okay.
Thank you very much for coming in today, Carole, and we appreciate your insight into Bowers, and for helping us with this oral history project that we're doing. And this is our way of trying to kind of preserve Santa Ana history.
Yeah, because things change.
Mm-hmm.
Things change, and probably every 10 years there'll be big changes.
Yes.
Everything changes so fast now. Well, gee, it was really nice meeting you.
Thank you. You too.